Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be discussing about the same topic that we have discussed for the last 2 weeks, which is the unconditioned realities, the asankata paramatta. I think we in the first day we made the approach to understand what is nirvana and how it is. It can be explained in 2 ways, like as an unconditioned reality and also the non-arising of the unarisen suffering or the non-arisen suffering. Then we also discussed about few other types of nirvana, unconditioned realities. Last week we completely dedicated the entire lecture to explain about the sammuti nirvana, which was freedom from certain dangers, certain fears, worldly types of sufferings. And then we are left with explaining another 3, tadanga, vikambana and samucheda. So I then later thought that I would make a different approach to explain these unconditioned realities. First we explain how nirvana is the greatest bliss and how it should be explained as a different state, at the same time how it is equal to the non-arising of the not arising or the non-arising of the non-arisen suffering. So then with that same approach, like now we made a formula, the causes are prevailing, the result has not arisen yet. So if you remove the causes, you get freed from these results, the results which have not arisen yet. So that freedom or the non-arising of those effects, unarisen effects, is called liberation, that we get liberated from the non-arisen suffering. So with the same approach, like this formula, the cause is prevailing, the result has not arisen yet, so you remove the cause, the result would cease before it's arising. So in that approach, I think we can explain all types of nirvana with more logical or understandable approach. Then also we have to equalize it with a unconditioned state. So in the end, what we are telling is there are few types of such unconditioned states which are equal to the non-arising of the non-arisen suffering. For that, first we will go into the normal chart that we have been using. So I'll be drawing the same diagram. So this was the suffering which continues. This is the birth, and then these are the realities that are supposed to happen in this life. This would be the death, and then there was karma. Then it is supported by avidya and tanha. Same formula, same thing happened in the past life. Karma supported by avidya and tanha brought this life. Actually, the karma, we have to say the karma got the opportunity at one place. Yeah, this is the place where the opportunity was gained. So rebirth happened, right? Then in the previous life there was nama and rupa. This is how it gave, and now in this life we have it, and one day the karma would gain the opportunity and it will give result to a rebirth, the non-arisen suffering, right? The non-arisen suffering. So we take this as the present moment, and this is the opportunity. The opportunity, the karma gain. This is also the opportunity. Right, the opportunity. So this was the diagram. So as long as the causes are prevailing, we are bound with the suffering that is going to happen. We are bound with the suffering that is going to happen. So, before they have arisen, what we can do is we can remove these causes, so the suffering would cease, and that cessation of the suffering is called the nirvana, the unconditioned state. So the formula was, the cause was there and the result has not arisen yet, So when the cause is removed, the unarisen results would be put down. That is the formula. As long as the cause is prevailing, we are bound with these results which have not arisen yet. When the cause is put down or removed, these results would come into cessation before they are arising. So that was the normal formula. So now we'll go into explain about the 5 types of nirvana from bottom to top. If you go into the handout 1.7, we can see that there are 5 types of such states propounded in the Theravada tradition. So 1.7.1, 1.7.2, 1.7.3 and 1.7.4 and 1.7.5. So the last one is Nissarana Nirvana. That was the nirvana that we aspire to attain. So what is that? Is this liberation from the suffering and also from the defilements that are going to happen. So I'll just focus on the suffering part without giving much attention to the defilement part. So when the causes are prevailing, we are bound with the suffering. So when these causes are removed by whatever means, by bringing up the path consciousness, if the path consciousness arises here, they will be removed and we'll become freed from that suffering at that moment of the cutting off of the causes. The liberation happens at that moment. We don't need to stay till the death to encounter that, to feel that. So similarly, a metaphor is, now someone is sentenced to death in 7 days. After 7 days, someone is sentenced to death. So sentenced to be killed. So after 4 days, the relatives somehow get the pardon from the government or from the king. So as soon as he get the pardon, he is able to get out from the prison. But he was supposed to be killed after 7 days. So his death was going to happen in 7 days. On the 4th day, he got released. So when we talk about his liberation from the death, he got liberated from the suffering of death. To experience that liberation, he doesn't need to spend another 3 days outside the prison and say, only when the 7th day comes, he would not say that I got liberated at this moment. The liberation happened on the 4th day itself. The moment he got released, the moment the verdict was turned down, that moment the person got the liberation. So therefore, when the path consciousness removes the causes, that is the moment you attain the nirvana. Attainment means the cessation of the suffering. So if you put this analogy, now this is the path consciousness, this removes the causes and the liberation happens. So that is the great nirvana that we were talking. Now when we think about the 4th type of nirvana, samucceda nirvana, cessation of the defilements. Now we know, in one lecture we mentioned, these are the non-arisen suffering. Actually, the non-arising nature of the suffering should be said as a potential. Actually, these were the positions of the future realities, the future reality that would arise. Even at this moment, we possess a certain potential to experience these sort of suffering. So actually, the non-arisen suffering should be considered as a potential, not as a reality, a separate reality. That potential is supposed to arise. So when the potential is being removed, that arising does not happen. So the same analogy should be used with regard to the defilements. Defilements arises as separate mental entities. If they remain, they would keep on arising. They are supposed to arise on certain occasions. So according to Theravadians, the potency is the thing that arises as a separate entity. The potency arises as a separate entity. So now what happens if this is the path consciousness? If this consciousness arises and remove the avidya and tanha, what happens? this, now it was supposed to arise at one day when the causes, when the conditions gather. When the conditions gather, it was supposed to arise. So what happens is, when the path consciousness removes this possibility of them arising would also come into cessation. Would also come into cessation. Now think about this as the result, this as the separate entity as a result. So what happens is, when the potency is removed, causes are removed, these things are not going to come up as separate realities. Result are not going to come up. So therefore, in this regard, when the potency has been removed, we don't see the arising of suffering any further, arising of suffering any further, arising of defilements any further. So therefore, we can say the non-arising of defilements is the liberation, because non-arising of the suffering itself was a liberation, is the freedom from such suffering. So in the same manner, so when the potency has been removed, we don't experience the separate mental states which are defilements. So in that case, when the potencies have been removed, we say they are not going to happen anymore. In this regard, we can say they got liberated from the defilements. The liberation happens from the liberation of the mind. Unless we become noble beings, unless we attain the noble paths, we are supposed to be burnt by the defilements which arise within ourselves. So it means like when the dosa arises, the anger arises, the lust arises, it doesn't bring us any peace. It torments our body, it torments our mind. That's the normal nature. So if we get rid of these defilements, that is a great liberation that we experience. We are not going to encounter any suffering, any sadness, any fears, any sort of attachments that are not very pleasant. Attachment may be pleasant for some moment, but in the long run, it doesn't give much good pleasant results, because it causes for the suffering as sorrow and so forth. So therefore, now when the causes have been removed, the effects are not going to happen any further. And the next way to explain is the removal of this suffering itself, because it's a potency. That's how we have to explain. Now it is different from when we say anupanna realities, it's a little bit different from anupanna realities, because anupanna realities, the potency depends on these causes, but this also has to be explained as a potency within the Theravadians. So when the potency is removed, its arising is not going to happen any further. Its arising is not going to happen any further. So therefore, this, when the cause has been removed, here we consider this as the cause and this as the effect. That's another point. In terms of Theravada, the potency and the reality we consider as the same thing. We don't want to separate them as two different realities. But in this regard, since this is a potency and since this is a reality, we take them as two different states. So when the causal state, the potency is removed, we would not experience the reality state. We are not going to experience the reality state. So that freedom from this reality state is a liberation. At the same time, because actually what have been removed is the potency, we can also say the liberation from the potency itself is the liberation. So in that sense, we are not going to, now we have to consider this as the suffering, the entire thing as the suffering. This is the we can say this is the suffering and this is the cause of the suffering. At the same time, we can say this is also a part of the suffering, because of this we are bound with the suffering. So when the causes are, the reasons are removed, we become freed from the suffering. Suffering is not going to happen any further. So that is called the cessation of defilements. Cessation of defilements. Cessation of suffering. Cessation of the suffering which is going to happen, the cessation of the defilements which are going to occur, both are considered as the liberation by the Buddha. So that's why in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, he mentioned the nirvana in terms of getting liberated from tanha, in terms of getting liberated from the craving. Yotassa eva tanhaya asesa viraga nirodho chago patinissaggo muttyanalo. The giving up, the eradication, abandoning of this craving is the liberation. So we can explain nirvana in two aspects. One is the liberation from the suffering, suffering of birth, suffering of death, suffering of decaying, suffering in the woeful states, suffering of being separated from the relatives, suffering of being encountering or getting mixed with the unloved ones or enemies and so forth. So these are all sort of suffering. So getting rid of these sufferings is nirvana. In the other aspect, getting rid of the defilements, the causes of suffering, is also a liberation. Getting rid of the cause of suffering is also considered as a liberation. So therefore, nirvana can be explained in two ways: getting rid of the suffering or the getting rid of the cause of the suffering. So both are explained as nirvana. So therefore, we can say now in some places Buddha has mentioned about the nirvana as a liberation from the defilements, which are also suffering. That's another point. Defilements are the causes of suffering, but they themselves are a real suffering. That's why we don't experience any real bliss when the defilements are present within us. So therefore, in the noble truth aspect, we do separate the suffering and the cause of the suffering. But when compared to the nirvana, both are in the same category. Both are in the same category. So that's why in the beginning Buddha mentioned there is only two stages: the suffering and the liberation from the suffering. Cause and the suffering, cause of the suffering and the suffering are both in the same category. So getting freed from the cause of suffering and getting freed from the suffering are both considered as nirvana, right? Both considered as nirvana. So therefore, the potencies, when the potencies are present within us, when we get rid of the potencies, it is considered as a liberation. When we get rid of the potencies, we get rid of the result. This is also a liberation. These also considered as a liberation. So in that sense, defilements are the causes for our rebirth, causes for our continuation of suffering in samsara. So when the defilements are removed, that suffering is not going to happen anymore. It's a liberation. And that removal of the causes, the defilements itself, is also a liberation, because they are the causes. At the same time, they are also a certain type of a suffering. They are also a great type of they play a huge role in the portion of suffering. So in that sense, we call two types of nirvana: dukkha kanda nibbana and kilesa nibbana. Nibbana is cessation. Cessation of the aggregates. Cessation of the aggregates is a liberation. Then the cessation of the defilements. So this is aggregates like matter, feeling, perception and so forth. Kilesa is defilements. So liberation from defilements and liberation from the aggregates. So what sort of aggregates we get liberated? That is from this aggregates that we are going to encounter if the causes prevail. If we were not arahants, we would be surely born. So it means arising of certain aggregates which are suffering. If the aggregates, the khandas arise, we are sure to get decay and die one day. And we are sure to experience certain types of various types of sufferings within the samsara. So therefore, we encounter when the causes are removed, we get freed from the aggregates. That is a liberation. When the causes are removed, it itself is removal of causes is also a liberation, because we are freed from the suffering when the causes are freed. So therefore, when we say nirvana, Buddha has explained in two ways: getting rid of the defilements, getting rid of the cause, aggregates, which are the real suffering according to the Buddhist teachings, right? So that is how we explain the fourth and fifth type of nirvana. So I'll repeat. I'll come back to the formula. When the causes prevail, effect has not arisen, so we get rid of the effect. It is a liberation. When the causes prevail, effect has not arisen yet, we get rid of this effect, is also liberation. And also removal of the causes itself is considered as a liberation. So therefore, the fourth and fifth are regarded as the great liberation that we aspire to. I think some of you have heard some teachers would say Nibbana is the getting rid of lust, Nibbana is the getting rid of anger, Nibbana is the cessation of delusion. That is in the second aspect of Nirvana. Some teachers would explain Nirvana as the getting rid of the defilements. That is also 100% correct according to the Theravada tradition. And some would explain the getting rid of the rebirth, getting rid of the decaying, getting rid of the death. So we call it the deathlessness. No birth there, no aggregates are there, there is no suffering at all. Then we are talking about the other aspect of Nirvana, Khandha Nibbana. So sometimes, otherwise people have a question, what is Nirvana? Is it the, some would say no, Nirvana is the getting rid of the defilement. Yes, it is correct in one aspect. Some would say Nirvana is the getting rid of the birth. This is also correct aspect, a correct approach. So therefore we have to keep in mind Buddhism advocates, the Theravadins advocate two ways, two types of Nirvana, but in the end it refers to the same thing. It refers to the same thing. The Nirvana has been explained as the liberation from the suffering, and also Nirvana has been explained as the liberation from the cause of suffering. It is the defilements. But at the same time I have to mention causes of suffering are also possess the characteristics of suffering. Lobha possesses the characteristic of suffering. So therefore in the end we can say getting rid of suffering is Nirvana, bringing causes of suffering and suffering into the one group, into a one group. So that is the, so in both the cases what we get rid of is the non-arisen suffering. These defilements has not arisen yet, so we call non-arising of the unarisen defilements. These sufferings has not arisen yet, non-arising of unarisen suffering. You cannot get rid from something which has arisen and passed away. It has arisen and passed away. There's nothing, there's no liberation from that. You have experienced it already. The liberation happens from what is going to happen. Before it occurs, you have to get liberated. Liberation is always from something, from a danger, from a suffering that has not come yet, arisen yet. Yeah, that is the fourth and fifth type of suffering, Nirvana. Now we go into the third type of Nirvana. If you go into the list, we find Vikambana Nibbana. Vikambana. Right? Vikambana Nirvana. If you go to the next page, 1.10, 1.10. Vikambana Nibbana is a temporary cessation or temporary freedom from the defilements that have been strongly suppressed by mundane absorption and the jhana factors and various perceptions of lower lokiya jhanas that have been abandoned by higher jhana. Right? So this site of Nibbana has been referred in the Navaka Nipata of Anguttara Nikaya with the terms Sandittika Nibbana, Nibbana, Paranibbana, Tadanga Nibbana and Dittadhamma Nibbana. A synonym for this Nibbana is Vikambana Pahana. So how do we understand this? Now we talked about the eradication of suffering before, eradication. Now we are talking about the suppression of suffering, the same formula will be applied. Now we take about 5 hindrances. 5 hindrances is the lust, the anger, the sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse and skeptical doubt. We call in Pali Kama, Chanda, Vyapada, Tina Midda, Uddacha, Kukucha and Vichikicha. These are the natures that hinder our practice, hinder our higher attainments. So as long as the defilement, hindrances are present, we would be born in the karma realm. So what some do is, some people develop their samatha meditation and attain jhanas. If you think this as a jhana, for example. Previously we drew it as magga, now it's jhana. So when jhana is attained, what happens? Now before the jhana, hindrances used to occur again and again. And if the jhana was not developed yet, these hindrances would occur again and again. That is natural. If you have not developed our concentration, we would have defilements, we regularly experience defilements. At the same time, in future also, we can expect them to arise. Anytime they could arise because they have not been suppressed. So what happens, some people develop a jhana. So when the jhana is developed, what happens to the defilement, hindrances, is they are suppressed, deeply suppressed, not removed. I don't draw the X mark like cutting mark. They are suppressed. So when the defilements are suppressed, hindrances are suppressed, they would not arise as regular as they used to be. As regular as they used to be. Now when the jhana is not attained, we normally naturally get the defilements within ourselves again and again. Whenever a pleasant or unpleasant object we encounter with a pleasant or unpleasant object, what happens is the defilements would come up. So when they have been fully suppressed, even a pleasant object or unpleasant object we encounter with such an object, the mind would not react as it used to be as before. As it used to be as before. So that is the difference. So when we put down those defilements, when we suppress the hindrances, our mind becomes freed, come into a calm state. Calm state means it's not going to experience any sort of tormenting natures, tormenting things. So what happens is, with this attainment, when the hindrances are put down, after this, it was, before it was going to happen, now it is no more going to happen. It's like we can say this potency also was put down. Also was put down. So it's not going to happen any further. Right? It's not going to happen any further. Though it's temporary, as long as you remain in the jhana, you process the ability of jhana. So I'll remove this present moment at the moment. Now, for instance, think now this person remain in the jhana, right? Remain in the jhana. And at a certain time, unfortunately, for instance, this person had a strong defilement, like he couldn't control his mind, a defilement arose within him and he lost the jhana, for instance. Think that he lost the jhana. If this was the defilement, like what happens to Bodhisattva in some lives, he had the jhanas, but because of some other reason, the defilements comes back up. So he lost his concentration. So what happens is, when such a defiling nature arises means this comes up. This comes up. We can also make it more clearer by saying, now in the previous consciousness, the ayonusaya manasikara, the unwise attention, if this is the unwise attention, this unwise attention, now this was put down normally. The defilements were put down till here. Till here. Because of unwise attention, the defilements were brought back again. So eventually, it arises in the next mind moment. The next mind moment. So now, if we consider this as the unwise attention, ayonusaya manasikara, unwise attention, because of the unwise attention was also caused by these defilements, and now when this happens, the defilements which were suppressed became more active, came into an active state. Then it eventually starts to arise within the mind stream. So now the liberation means, actual liberation means, now from this moment, at this moment, the defilements were put down. These hindrances, if I saw this is the hindrances, they were put down at this moment. Now, they came down. So it means they were in a very deep state. They were in a very deep state. They were put down. But unfortunately, for some reason, there was an unwise attention. There was an unwise attention. So defilements got activated. Right? Got activated. And then the defilements arose. Now, what is the nirvana we are talking about? The Vikamana Nibbana. After the jhana was attained, right? After the jhana was attained, I would call it like from this moment, from the arising moment, it's better to say, not in the middle. From the arising moment, the defilements were put down. Right? So they are in a deep state. Earlier they were in a very shallow state. Shallow state means our mind was more closer to these defilements, so they would arise again and again. With the jhana, they were suppressed. I'm just showing it visually, but it doesn't mean that this happens in such a materialistic way. So now this suppression, the defilements have been suppressed down, put down, right? So during this stage, even there was some certain objects we encountered, the mind was not affected by these defilements. They are not going to happen. So this freedom, otherwise, if this jhana was not attained, what would have been the reason? What would have been the cause? Like defilements would have arisen again and again. So when the thing was removed, this potency was lost. This potency was lost. So it's the non-arising. The defilements would have arisen otherwise, would have arisen. So that arising of defilements have been temporarily suppressed. It's a suppression. So it's a non-arising of the unarisen defilements. Otherwise these defilements would have arisen during these 5 years. If you take this 5 years, during these 5 years, defilements would have arisen many times, but all those arisings have been put down. Why? The hindrances were greatly suppressed. Hindrances were greatly suppressed by this attainment. They were suppressed by this attainment, right? So if the causes were not put down, they would arise as results, they would arise as different mental states, so the mind became freed from that. The same analogy, if the causes were there, suffering was going to happen, so when the causes were put down, suffering was ceased before their arising. That cessation of suffering was called the nirvana. The same way that when the defilements were not removed, they were supposed to arise. When they are removed, they would not arise. That is the cessation of the defilement. In the same manner, even though this is a temporal cessation, but still the formula is the same. So when the hindrances were put down, the defilements are not going to happen. So we call it a concentration. So that is the function of concentration. Now we'll come into the practical aspect. This was the theory. So if we have a strong concentration like a jhana, our mind becomes freed from the defilement. Freedom from defilement means it's not only that while we are in the jhana. Freedom happens as long as a strong defilement arises. As long as a strong defilement arises, our mind is freed from such defilements. Our mind is freed from such defilements. There is no possibility that they would affect our mind unless there was an unwise attention, which brought up the defilements again, which destroyed our peaceful state. Actual destruction happens when it arises. But now a step has been taken for this to happen, for whatever reason. Now what happens is, during this stage, we are not going to experience the suffering as we used to before. So that's why when we have gained a strong concentration, after good meditation, when you wake up and go for your day-to-day work, you feel a lot of calmness there. You feel that your mind is different. Why is that? What is the difference that we experience? It is the freedom from the regular suffering, regular defilements that we encounter. So you can easily observe this difference during a meditation retreat. Before the retreat, our mind was tormented by various defilements. But during the retreat and after you come out of the retreat, we experience the defilements have been put down greatly. So likewise, if it was the jhana, other occasions we do experience certain liberations, but the fixed liberation happens when you attain a jhana. They have been fully put down. So as long as you don't lose the jhana, your mind is freed from such stuff. That is the experience, bliss of the concentration. That's the value of concentration. So we get freed from the certain sufferings. So this freedom, non-arising of defilement, is the Vikambana Nibbana, not the jhana itself. Jhana is the reason for this suppression. The liberation we are talking is the liberation of the mind from the hindrances. That's also something that we have to be very clear about. Considering jhana as the liberation is mentioned as a false consideration, false nirvana in Brahmajala Sutta. 4 jhanas, considering 4 jhanas as the nirvana is called Micchadittika nirvana. It's a wrong consideration. So what here what the Buddha was advocating in the Buddha and the Venerable Ananda, as I remember, was advocating in the Anguttara Nikaya, the liberation from these defilements that would have occurred had not the jhana was attained. So I'll repeat again, the liberation here means not the consciousness, not the pure consciousness. The state the consciousness attains, the pure state, with the suppression. How can we verify it with our own experience? We know the state of the mind is different. We know whether our mind is far away from the defilements. And it is that the defilements that would have occurred otherwise regularly are not going to occur. That is a suppression, or that is a non-arising of the regular defilements that would have occurred if not the jhana was attained. So likewise, if the Magga didn't eradicate the path and causes, these sufferings would arise. The cessation of that suffering is considered as a liberation. The same way, the hindrances that would have occurred otherwise, we get freed from such hindrances. So it's considered as a liberation. Liberation means freedom from the suffering that is going to happen. So what do we do with the concentration is, we develop our mind with a one-pointedness, with a one object, with a lot of understanding. Then what happens? The regular defilements that used to torment our mind are not going to torment it as it used to be. So therefore, we consider that as a liberation. So I hope that was clear. So this is the value of a samadhi. When you have a strong samadhi, our mind, it's not like while you are always in the concentration, but you have to keep on entering into the concentration and maintain this. That is very utterly important. But our liberation, even while we are a person who has jhana, even while he is doing day-to-day work, he is not going to get defilements as usual. If a strong defilement arises while he is doing something, he loses the ability to enter into jhana as before. No one loses the jhana while he is in the jhana. While he is in the jhana, no defilement is going to come up. Defilements would always come up while he is doing some day-to-day work. While he is observing something or some object, then suddenly the defilements arises, a strong defilement, and he get into that. He plunges into that object, in the defilement, and he loses the jhana. That is what has happened in all the stories of the Bodhisattva. Even while he was flying, some people were flying. During the flight, with a jhana, you are not in the jhana chitta, you are in the ordinary chitta. The jhana just initiates the flight. During the flight, you fly with a normal kamavachara chitta. The initial lift, or we call the takeoff, was made by the jhana chitta. During the flight, he observes all the objects, he listens to the sounds, he sees the object, he could talk. So it happens with the normal ordinary chitta. With the power of the initial jhana, abhinya chitta, the flight happens. So during the flight, he may see certain various objects, and if he is unwise, he pays unwise attention, he may get defilement and he loses jhana and he falls down. Not like a rock falls down, like a cotton, he just floats down to the earth safely, and he loses that ability to fly again. Right? Always everyone loses the jhana while they are in day-to-day work, not while they are in the jhana. So thing is, when you attain a strong concentration like jhana, as long as you don't lose this, your mind is in a liberated state. That is that liberation, freedom from the defilements that would have occurred if the jhana was not attained. So this suppression causes this freedom. So this suppression as the eradication itself is a liberation. So the suppression itself is a liberation, and also the non-arising of these defilements is also a liberation. Both aspects we consider as a liberation. We call this the Vikkamana Nibbana, but it is temporal. Because the reason, now in the previous occasion, it was completely cut off. So there is no possibility that they would come up. There is no possibility. Whatever object comes, whatever, even the person is not very energetic, still the defilements cannot come up. But in this case, the defilements are kept in bay, like they were kept like rubber ball has been put down on the water and is kept there without letting it to pop up. So therefore the real cause is still prevailing. So that's why Buddha said it is not a utterly safe state. It's not utterly safe. As long as the causes prevail, at any time they would come up. At any time they would come up. So therefore, this is how we explain the Tadanga Nirvana. So then the next form, next type of Nirvana is, sorry, that was Vikambana Nibbana. The Tadanga Nibbana. 1.7.2. 1.7.2. If you go to the next page, we can see 1.9, the explanation is given. 1.9, Tadanga Nibbana. Is the temporary cessation of certain defilements or temporary freedom from certain defilements due to the arising of opposite wholesome states, mentalities. It is the calm state the mind stream of a certain being attains while developing wholesome qualities. When we develop certain wholesome qualities like sila, we attain this state. This sort of Nibbana has been discussed in the Tadanga Nibbana Sutta of Anguttara Nikaya and Salleka Sutta of Majjhima Nikaya. This Nibbana is attained by suppressing various defilements with wholesome qualities which are opposite to them, hence called Tadanga Nibbana. The name Tadanga Nibbana was given by suppression of the defilements by completely opposite states. Like for example, now we'll change the diagram a little bit, not entire completely. So instead of having jhana, we'll think about another example. Now, hindrances. We'll just say kilesa, strong defilements, strong kilesa. Right? Now, because of strong anger, sometimes would cause panatipata, killing. Now, think about a person who used to kill animals, right? Who used to kill animals. So now what happens? He's the present moment. Now, because of this killing, sorry, we'll take it here. Present moment. No, he is not abstained from killing. So killing would occur daily. For example, he is a daily killer of animals. Now this is the present moment. Even after this, if he doesn't restrain himself, he would keep on doing killing. So his mind is bound with certain type of defilements to encounter the suffering of defilements. When we kill someone, it is not a pleasant state of our mind. We know that it is an unpleasant state. We have anger. It's not at calm. It's not at peace. It's not in calmness. So therefore, now at the moment he encounters, this is the present moment, he is bound with these sufferings of defilements arising again and again. That is the nature of this person. So fortunately what happens, now think, fortunately, this person observes sila at this moment. For instance, he observes sila. Sila is virtue. With the observation, now this is a defilement, the red line. With the strong observation, he put down this, he suppresses these defilements. He suppresses these defilements. So what happens, as long as he remains in this suppression, like if the defilement doesn't arise, the suppression was kept without breaking the sila, these defilements that would have occurred would cease before they are arising. The same formula. It's like causes were there, effects were supposed to happen. When the causes were removed, effects are not going to happen. So when the causes were suppressed, the regular killing is not going to happen. So it's a cessation. His mind becomes freed from these sufferings. The mind becomes freed from this suffering. The mind becomes freed from this suffering. Right? So that is considered as a liberation. Right? That is considered as a liberation. So now think like this suppression was made for some reason. This person has an unwise attention. This person had an unwise attention, for instance, right? Person had unwise attention, and then because of that unwise attention, these defilements were activated, got activated, became stronger, and then eventually they would arise, and he does the killing. Now think, this is the moment he starts to kill again. Right? This is the moment he started to kill again someone. Right? Right? Killing. Now during this entire stage where he observed the sila, it means he didn't break the sila during this time. He observed the sila here, so the defilements were suppressed. Now this is the moment he broke the sila. This is the moment he broke the sila, right? We can say it's like it came little bit up here when it was effected. Now it came up strongly. We can call it like this, okay? This is the moment it came up. The killing, right? So now if you think, during this entire phase the regular killing did not happen. So the freedom from such states, like such defilements of killing, is a liberation. The same formula has to be used. Now this is the time he lost his sila. So during this period, right? During this period, he didn't have that regular killing. So his mind was freed from the act of killing. His mind was freed from the act of killing. Had he not observed the sila, he would be doing that as a regular act, which would torment his mind and also give suffering for the other beings. At the same time, in the first place, his mind would be tormented by this anger. Therefore, by the suppression, by observing a sila, putting down the defilements, the person get liberated from the regular defilement that caused the caused him unvirtuous person, like doing the evil acts. So he's freed. His mind is freed from evil acts. Otherwise, if you remember, if this was not put down, they would have occurred again and again. So as long as he doesn't break the sila, his mind is in a calm state. The same analogy. The suffering that would have occurred was put down, was completely removed in the nirvana. Here they are temporarily suppressed. There is a freedom from this suffering temporarily. So that is called the Tadanga Nibbana. Even the jhana, suppression of jhana can be called a Tadanga Nirvana in some places according to a certain context. But here we normally talk about the sila. So when you observe the sila and when you remain in the sila, this is what happens. This is the formula. Now you observe the sila, but you are not going to think about the sila again and again throughout the entire day. You just observe once a day or once in a while. And you just keeps it, you practices it. What happens in the ultimate sense? The defilements have been suppressed because of your observation. So only it will be broken when you do the act of killing again. The gross defilement comes into activation. So as long as it is not broken, you are in the sila. What does it mean by you are in the sila? The gross defilement that breaks the sila doesn't come into surface. Why is that? They have been suppressed by this observation of sila. So during that observation, it's not the sila is a mental state like a jhana. Like jhana, sila is the mental state. We are talking about the suppression. Because of the suppression, mind becomes freed from defilements. So this suppression or the freedom from the defilement is considered as a liberation, not the sila itself. Sila is not a liberation. Sila is a cause for liberation. Magga is a cause for liberation. Jhana is a cause for liberation. Because of Magga, the defilements are removed. The suffering, so we don't encounter the suffering. Because of the Magga, defilements are removed, so we don't encounter defilements within our mind stream. With the wisdom, they are removed. So when we attain a strong concentration, our mind is not affected by defilements anymore, so we get liberated from defilements. But in that case, as it has been a suppression, not a complete removal, they can come up at any time. So when you observe the sila, you put down the defilements. They are not going to come up as regularly, but if we are not wise enough, they may come up and break our sila, and our mind comes into a lower state again. It gets deprived of that liberated state. So likewise, that's why the sila, samadhi and panya. In the vipassana level, we explain it the same way. If this is the vipassana wisdom, defilements are put down. They are not going to come up as usual. Especially the doubt, the wrong views, attachments and so forth. Because the understanding suppress the defilements and they are not going to come up if you really attain the vipassana wisdoms. So likewise, the sila, samadhi and panya in the Buddhist teachings has to be explained in this aspect. So what does it mean? The value of sila is very important. Sila is not just an observation. As long as you don't break the sila, you can see that your mind is not oppressed or tormented by the defilement, the gross defilements, which makes you an unvirtuous person. So you are in a liberated state. Your mind is liberated from those defilements. It's a very wonderful way to look into this aspect. If we suppress strong oppressing defilements that comes up into the mind, that obsession defilement, the pariyuttana, the wrong thinkings and so forth, with a strong concentration. As long as you maintain this concentration with proper behaviors, it means you are able to go back into that concentration. So during that entire period, you possess that ability, not while you are in the concentration. As long as you possess the ability to enter into concentration, during that entire period, your mind is freed from certain defilements. As long as you don't break the sila, your mind is freed from such defilements. In the Magga's aspect, there's nothing to be maintained because the causes are completely removed. So it's going to be a permanent sort of a liberation. Permanent liberation. It doesn't mean now here the Vikammana Nibbana, the Tadanga Nibbana, this liberation is not impermanent. What happens is the liberation is not going to arise or passes away. It exists even at this moment. It's a matter of fact that you put down the defilements and your mind stream attains it. The great nirvana exists even at this moment. So what happens is when we remove the causes, our mind attains that state. In the same way, the Tadanga and Vikammana nirvanas do exist. And what happens is, with the jhana and with the sila, you suppress the defilements and the mind comes into that calm, peaceful state. In the Magga, it is completely removed, so what remains is the liberated state. So likewise, all these states are unconditioned, all these states are permanent. So what happens is, in the Tadanga and Vikammana level, it enters into this state, but there is a possibility that it may come out of the state. Why? The causes are still prevailing, which takes your mind out of the stream, out of that state. But when the causes are completely removed, there's no way that the mind could come back out of that state. So then when we come into the last aspect, that is number 1 actually, because we went into the reverse order. This is called Sammuti Nibbana, 1.7.1. 1.7.1. So it has been explained in the same page, 1.8, Sammuti Nibbana. It's a temporal freedom from the suffering of the world, such as pain, fear, cruelty of others, sickness, which have not been confronted or encountered. Now we'll go into that aspect, which we explained last time. So then we can conclude this lecture, right? So in the previous life, what do you think? We had the karma. Karma gained the opportunity and it gave a result, right? It gave a result. Now when we think about the karma, right, we'll just keep the defilements We just keep the defilements as defilements in the shortened form. We have two types of karma, kusala kamma and akusala kamma. Right? Kusala kamma and akusala kamma. Only one could gain the opportunity. Only one could gain the opportunity. Now think about the previous life. Now we are born as human beings. Human beings are considered as a good state. Right? Humans are considered as a good state. So now what happens? Kusala and akusala. Only one could gain the opportunity, not both. Now think, if the kusala gained the opportunity, akusala was put down. Put down means it didn't get the opportunity. It's considered as a putting down. Right? It's considered as a putting down. Like for whatever reason, it didn't gain the opportunity. So kusala is dominant here. So the kusala gave the rebirth. Right? Kusala gave the rebirth. We are not talking about akusala giving results during the life. We are talking about the birth, life producing. Now, as long as we remain in this life, this akusala, which was put down, would follow our mind stream, but it doesn't have the opportunity to bring the suffering of a woeful being. It doesn't have the opportunity to bring the suffering of a woeful being. So we may encounter certain hardship in our human lives. We may get lose something, we may get accusations, we may get sick, we may have problems in our family. There are things, but still that akusala is unable to give us the experience of an animal. It's unable to give us the experience of a hungry ghost. It's unable to give us the experience of a hell being. Why is that? The kusala kamma had taken the place of a new life. So as long as this remains, this akusala is unable to give us the experience of a woeful state. Now think, unfortunately, if we think, at the moment of death, for example, the moment of death, for whatever reason, at the moment of death, if the kusala kamma, now this kusala kamma has expired, this akusala, if this akusala gained the opportunity, think that the opportunity was given to an akusala kamma, which was put down at the previous birth, previous death of the previous life. Now think, this akusala was put down, but it did follow our mind stream. Now, unfortunately, if this akusala gained the opportunity to give the next rebirth, right? This kusala which gave the rebirth has expired, is not going to give any rebirth any further, that's finished. Now, this akusala was put down, and there were so many other kusalas even. Now, there were also not only one kusala gained the opportunity, right? Other kusalas were also didn't get the opportunity, right? They didn't get the opportunity. Both were following. Now, again, kusala and akusala were following our mind stream. One kusala, this kusala, for example, kusala 1 was giving the life. It was producing the life. Other kusalas and akusalas were dormant in our life. Now think, this akusala gained the opportunity. The other kusalas didn't get the opportunity. So what happens? We are born in a woeful state, not in a blissful state. We are born in a woeful state. So we lost. Now during this period, now this is the period we lost the bliss of a good realm. From here, we are now in the woeful realm. Right? Think, if this was also a woeful realm, for example, apaya, and this was also in the apaya. Now think about this few years, like 40, 50 years that we lived as a human being. During this period, before that, we had the potency to be born in the woeful realms. But for whatever reason, our kusala kammas were put down, kusala kamma gained the opportunity, so it gave a birth as a human being. So during that life, there were hardships, but compared to the woeful realms, akusala could never bring us an experience of a woeful being. So the entire life is considered as a liberation. During that entire period, the hardship that would have brought by a akusala rebirth, if this was a akusala rebirth, it would have been a completely different story. What we experience, the way we react, our ability, the intellectual levels, our associations, our past karmas, the opportunities the other karmas gain, it's a completely different upside down story. But it was completely changed because a kusala kamma gained the opportunity. So we have a completely different experience during this life. So if the kusala kamma didn't get the opportunity, what happens? That akusala, if the akusala gave the rebirth, there would have been lots of suffering that we are going to encounter. So we became freed from such encounters temporarily. That's true. Why is that? The akusalas didn't get the opportunity to give a rebirth. So this is considered as a liberation. We call this sammuti nibbana. It's sammuti nirvana. It's not something attained by suppression of defilement. It's something that is attained by suppression of karma. And this can be applied in day-to-day life even. It's a suppression of the material causes. So we become healthy and so forth. So likewise, this is how we explain the sammuti nirvana. So now if you apply this to the asanya satta, what happens? If you apply this to asanya satta, think this is a human life. If you consider this as a human realm, right? And we suppress the defilements for the defilements, attachment towards the mind. So then we are born with the fifth jhana kusala, right? As a human being, we did possess both nama and rupa. If you draw it in two colors, both nama and rupa we did possess, right? If this is the rupa, right, this is nama. But if now the fifth jhana kusala gain the opportunity, right? So what happens? He gets a life without nama, only rupa is present, right? And then in the next life, what happens? A kusala kamma would get the opportunity, not akusala, because when you die from asanya satta, Brahma realm, only a kusala would get the opportunity. You cannot directly go into the woeful realms. But with that birth, what happens? We are going to experience nama and rupa both. This is nama and also rupa, right? So during this period, the nama did not exist. The rising of nama was stopped. Why was that? Because this jhana got the opportunity to give a result. If this jhana didn't get the opportunity, both nama and rupa would have occurred. That was the normal procedure. Nama and rupa both would have occurred, right? But because this jhana gained the opportunity, the nama that would have occurred otherwise comes into cessation for 500 eons. So it's a liberation from the nama temporarily. Right? So that's how we explain asanya satta is also as a liberated state, though it's temporary. So likewise, I would conclude the lecture. So now the approach was made, liberation as the freedom from the suffering that would have occurred if the causes were not put down or not suppressed. And that, as the nibbana, was also explained in the same manner, and in the end we made it we equalized with the unconditioned state that already exists. In the same way, these the states the liberations that we experience with suppression are also considered as separate states in analogy with the nirvana. So that's why, how do we know it with without any doubt, that is through our experience, that we value it, we know how important that state of mind, being freed from defilement, how important it is, and we also see the difference. The value of samadhi, value of sila matters here. The value of being a human being, getting freed from all the sufferings of the woeful realm matters here. So likewise, they are so valuable, these liberations are so valuable, so they have been highly praised within the Buddhist teachings. But the thing is, sammuti, tadanga and vikamana states, you may attain it, but sometimes you may get out of it. So the real liberation would be the samucceda and nissarana nibbana, but it is utterly necessary that you have to maintain a strong sila, you have to be in the tadanga nirvana state to attain the great nirvana. You have to be in the vikamana nirvana state to get into the nirvana. It's not a must, the vikamana state is not a must, but it's very useful. It's very easy for our practice. And also we have to attain the sammuti nibbana state. Being a human being, being freed from certain sufferings, only then our mind will be able to attain the highest nirvana. So therefore, these first three types of nirvana should not be considered as something low, should not be considered as something trifle, should not be considered as something insignificant. It is really indeed significant, valuable, important for our path to the liberation. That is considered as the liberation while we are living. It's a great refuge for all of us. Right. So this will be the lecture, and I'll open the forum for the.
But I have a question about the last two nibbana.
Okay.
The last two kinds of nibbana. So the samucceda nibbana and nissarana nibbana.
Yeah.
So you said that samucceda nibbana is kilesa nibbana, and nissarana nibbana is khandha nibbana.
Both khandha nibbana and kilesa nibbana. But I just ignored that part for the explanation.
Right. So but then because you said that we can consider these two kind of nibbana, we can attain these two kinds of nibbana when the causes or the potencies are removed right at that moment.
Yeah.
Right, but it doesn't need to be at the end of the life of the arahant. So it looks to me that there is a little bit, how do I say, terminology, problem with the terminology, because usually we know the khandha nibbana. The khandha nibbana is equivalent to the ubadisesa nibbana. Right? That's what we I think at least that's what I learned. And then we equate the anupadisesa nibbana with the passing away of the arahant. So it looks like a little bit problem with the terminology.
So you mean at the moment of attainment we call it kilesa nibbana, not khandha, right? Moment of attainment we call it kilesa nibbana. That is called sopadisesa nibbana. And at the moment of saupadisesa, and at the moment of parinirvana we call anupadisesa nirvana, right? Anupadisesa. So that is a very basic kind of an explanation. Actually, we have sutras which explain that. Even now we have 5 types of anupadisesa puggalas. Like it's like this. I'll just read out something that I have written. Samucceda nibbana and nissarana nibbana are identical in terms of ultimate realities. It is the final destination of Buddhist teachings. In brief, samucceda nibbana can be termed as the non-arising of defilements that are eradicated by 4 supramundane paths, and the nissarana nibbana is the non-arising of defilements that are eradicated by 4 supramundane paths, and the non-arising of aggregates due to the eradication of their causes, that is to say the defilements. As samucceda nibbana is the non-arising of freedom from defilements that are eradicated by supramundane paths, according to the Tissa Brahma Sutta of Anguttara Nikaya. Tissa Brahma Sutta. Right? Tissa Brahma Sutta of Anguttara Nikaya, it is sevenfold according to the 7 types of noble persons. How it is also mainly twofold as Sopadisesa Nibbana and Anupadisesa Nibbana. This Samuchcheda Nibbana, again, it is sevenfold, right? So Samuchcheda Nibbana. Is 5 Sopadisesa, 2 Anupadisesa, right? Sopadisesa and Anupadisesa, right? So now it explains about the 5 types of noble beings and also the 2 types of arahants, So like then just so that is it. So this is the 5 types of Sopadisesa and 2 types of Anupadisesa. 2 types of Anupadisesa is attained by arahants, 2 arahants. 5 Sopadisesa we discuss about with the 5 lower noble beings, right? That is for the Anupadisesa and Sopadisesa explanation. Now we go into why did I say that you attain the Nissarana. Nissarana Nibbana and Samuchcheda Nibbana, Sopadisesa, Anupadisesa are different explanations. So when we say Nissarana Nibbana, it is the release from the suffering and also the defilements. Anupadisesa means you attain the nirvana without any remnant of suffering. So these are not identical. Samuchcheda Nibbana is twofold as Sopadisesa and Anupadisesa. So Anupadisesa is not equal to Nissarana. Sopadisesa is not equal to Samuchcheda. Samuchcheda and Nissarana are different categorizations. Sopadisesa and Anupadisesa are different categorizations. Right? So now when we say Anupadisesa and Sopadisesa, Sopadisesa means we get rid of the suffering and we get rid of the defilements. So when we say Sopadisesa Nibbana, now this is the moment of attainment of Magga and Phala. The kilesa is removed, the suffering that would have occurred is removed. Now he still keeps on living, for instance. Sorry, different color, sorry for that. He still keeps on living. Now while he is living, he is liberated from the khandhas, he is liberated from the defilements. But that liberation he experiences with remnant aggregates. He has some aggregates within him. That is the meaning of Sopadisesa. That is a liberation that you have attained at the moment of Magga, but you are still with some defilements. So at the moment of Parinirvana, the same liberation is attained. The liberation was attained here because there is no defilements, no aggregates. He is freed from non-nourishing defilement. You don't need to stay till here to become freed from non-nourishing defilement. These aggregates became seized at the attainment of Magga. So Sopadisesa means you experience this Kilesa Nibbana and Khandha Nibbana while some aggregates are still remaining. Anupadisesa means the same Nirvana is attained without any remnants, that is attained at the moment of Parinirvana. So Nissarana Nibbana and Kilesa Nibbana means Kilesa Nibbana only focuses on the removal of Kilesas. Nissarana Nibbana focuses on removal of Kilesas and also the removal of Khandhas. So this Anupadisesa, Sopadisesa categorization and Nissarana Samuchcheda categorization are different ways, different categories. They are not equal. So that's why we can find Tissa Brahma Sutta, Samuchcheda Nibbana. There are 5 types of Sopadisesa, 2 types of Anupadisesa.
Okay, thank you, Patti. เพราะฉะนั้น I guess the problem is not about the Samucceda Nibbana or Nisarana Nibbana or the Anubhadisesa or Subhadisesa, but about the word Kilesa Nibbana and Khanda Nibbana.
Okay.
Because so it looks like from
Khanda. Khanda Nibbana.
The term you use, Khanda, the Khanda Nibbana is like the arisen Khanda.
Yes, exactly. So Khanda Nibbana means now we get released from this suffering that are going to happen. When we say Khanda Nibbana, right? When we say Khanda Nibbana, it can refers to the kilesas because it includes kilesas also, right? So if I just forget about the kilesas, for example, when we say now these are also khandas because they are sankhara khanda. So when we say Khanda Nibbana, it covers both the khandas and the kilesas that are freed from this moment. So when we have Khanda Nibbana, we have the khandas that are following from the next rebirth are removed. These non-arisen sankhara khanda is removed, and also the chittaja rupa of akusala chittas. So these are removed. So removal of all these is called Khanda Nibbana. Kilesa Nibbana means removal of these potencies only. So when we say Nisarana Nibbana, it says Khanda Nibbana. So it includes both Kilesa and Khanda, whatever it is. When we say Khanda, Kilesas are also included. So when we say Kilesa Nibbana, Samucceda, we focus on this Kilesa Nibbana. So do we need to stay till here to experience this liberation? No. From this moment, we get rid of these khandas. From this moment, we get rid of these kilesas.
Yes, it's clear, but it's just that there is some certain teachers that he explains the Khanda Nibbana as the case of an Arahant. But he's still alive because he said that he still experienced suffering of the existing Khanda. So that's why he hasn't attained the Khanda Nibbana yet. So when he passed away, then that equates the Khanda Nibbana with the passing away of an Arahant.
So that's why I said it's
no longer experienced. Yeah.
That's why it said the word Anupadisesa, it comes from this word. So it has to be explained very clearly. Anupadisesa means the experience of Khanda or Kilesa Nibbana with some aggregates. Anupadisesa is aggregates are still remaining. But didn't he experience the Khanda Nibbana? Yes, he has experienced the Khanda Nibbana. But someone can ask, now what about these khandas? These khandas are nothing to be liberated. You cannot get liberated from these khandas. Because as long as the birth happened, these khandas are supposed to be experienced till death. Even the Chutti Chitta is a must for this Arahant because the birth has given. So therefore, it's a way of explaining. I don't criticize what the others say. I think what they are referring is the word Anupadisesa has been explained as a Khanda Nirvana, looking into these remnant khandas which cannot be liberated even by the Buddha. So Khanda Nibbana, when I say Khanda Nibbana, I am referring to all the aggregates that we get liberated from, not about these aggregates. Okay, sadhu.
Okay, thank you, Patti.
Good morning, Bandi.
Good morning, Sally.
Yeah, actually, I had the same question with Dr. Raya.
Okay. Is it clear?
Yeah, now it's clear.
Okay.
So another question is, for example, when we talk about Kanika Samadhi, we consider as Tatanga Nibbana or Samudhi Nibbana.
Kanika Samadhi is not specifically mentioned in this category. Now it's a very difficult, tough thing to say. As last time when Dr. Ryan asked about the number of Sammuti Nirvanas that we can have, it seems like very, very high number. It's a very, very uncountable sort of a number. So likewise, I'm also unable to explain now. What they have mentioned is you suppress defilements like, now these are the Tadanga Nirvanas, I would say. You go into Salleka Sutta, you find. You get rid of Panadipata, Adinadana, various sort of Duccharita, the bad evil deeds. We get rid of those bad evil deeds. This is called Tadanga Nirvana. When you attain the vipassana jnanas, this is called a tadanga nirvana. The defilements have been suppressed. And when we talk about like giving dana, is it a tadanga nibbana? It seems we can say temporarily it has been suppressed, but this always this tadanga nirvana comes from like you suppress something some kind of a long-term suppression is what we are talking normally. So if someone asks, like, while we are focusing on vipassana khanika samadhi, each and every moment, is it considered as a tadanga nirvana? I would not say no. But normally the tadanga nirvana has been explained. If you reach the upachara level, yes, we can call it a vikammana nirvana. When we observe the sila, we call it a tadanga nirvana. So I'm also not completely clear about this fact, how to make a clear-cut definition on this, which has been explained as nirvana and which is not has been explained as nirvana. But it seems like we abstain from certain deeds, certain mental states with a strong suppression, then we are considered like attaining nirvana. Now, for example, giving a Dhamma talk, surely we have a wholesome mind state. So, is it considered as a tadanga nirvana? Yes, we can see the same aspect. But as soon as we stop the Dhamma talk, the defilements could come up back again. So, likewise, to be true, I am unable to give an exact answer for this. The words that have been used to tadanga nirvana is sila, suppressing the duccharita with sila, suppressing defilements with vipassana jnana, suppressing certain attitudes with certain wholesome qualities and so forth. So yeah, giving dana or giving khanika samadhi, to be true, I am unable to give a direct answer, but it seems like they have the same characteristic. It seems like they are also should be included in tadanga nirvana.
So that means like when we talk about like Jaganusati and Buddhanusati, they all belong to the tadanga nirvana.
Like it's like this. Now the suppression, tadanga nirvana is the suppression of the defilements by a certain mental state. Suppression, and so the defilements are not arising. Both this suppression and the non-arising. So because of this, the mind stream is pure. So this state is the tadanga nirvana. So kusala is not the tadanga nirvana. With kusala you suppress the defilements and the mind becomes freed from such defilements. So that is the normally we call the nirvana. So with any meditation, in that sense, with any meditation, you Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, Sanghanusati, you suppress the defilements strongly. So your mind is freed from certain defilement. That freedom is nirvana, tadanga nirvana.
For me, it's something like when we talk about like a Jaganusati, something like when I read the ladies have a book, it's something like a Sammuti Nibbana.
Like, yeah, that's another point. Like when you say Sammuti Nibbana, it also includes, that's another good point that which I missed to explain. When we say Sammuti Nibbana, some part of Tadanga Nibbana is also included. Like for example, if we get rid of certain sorrows, like we lose someone we love, and we contemplate wisely, someone advises us, and I become freed from that suffering. This can be called as a Tadanga Nibbana, and also at the same time it can be called as a Sammuti Nibbana.
Okay.
Sammuti Nibbana is a broader aspect. It includes both freedom from sickness, freedom from the afflictions of the society, from the world, and also including certain defilements in our mind stream. But normally when we suppress the defilements, vipassana chitta, when we suppress defilements with a strong sila, we tend to put it into Tadanga group rather than Sammuti Nibbana group. But if we give up some enmity, if we get rid of some suffering, sorrow, sadness, this can be put into the Tadanga Nibbana, but it has been mostly discussed under the Sammuti Nibbana.
Okay, thank you, Bandi.
Anyway.
What I wanted to mention is about the Kanika Samadhi.
Yes, sir.
If the part of the freedom and the Sankata part, if it is clear for, I think this problem will be solved. You know, the Kanika Samadhi here means the concentration, the Cetasika, and the Nibbana is the freedom of some kilesa. So, if I think it also should be very clear for this question.
Right. It means like what Bhante is saying, Samadhi, like Kanika Samadhi, when Kanika Samadhi occurs, for example, the defilements would be put down and the mind is freed, and when you lose it, it comes back. So because of Kanika Samadhi, if you can put the defilements at bay, so this freedom, not the Samadhi, not the Samadhi, the freedom from the defilements and the latent forces is called Sammuti or Tadanga Nibbana. Is the Tadanga Nibbana, right? Is it what you mentioned, Bhante? Sana?
So, now when you say Padassara Midam Bhikkhave Chittam, so does it relate to Vikkamana Nibbana during that time?
No. Now, according to Theravada explanation, the mind becomes freed from when we are in the Vikkamana and Tadanga state. That is true. This Nirvana doesn't refer to the Chitta. Nirvana doesn't refer to the Chitta. Chitta is, as Bhante Devananda said, it's a Sankata, it's a conditioned reality. So, Nirvana is something that we attain. So, now when we say Pabassaramidam Bhikkhave Chittang, according to the Theravada tradition, we have two types of explanations. One is the Bhavanga Chitta of every being is freed from Akusala Chetasikas. Even when we are born in the woeful realm, the Bhavanga Chitta doesn't have Akusala Chitta. Even though it's a result of Akusala Kamma, the Chitta itself doesn't possess, is not connected with any unwholesome defilement. So, Buddha said it's Pabassara, it is brighter. Brighter means not defiled. So, when at the Javana level, when the defilements arises, the mind stream. So, when in that sense Buddha is talking, the Chitta is the mind stream. Entire mind stream became defiled when the defilements arises in the Javana level. That is a one explanation. In the other way, the tradition says it's not only for the Upakkilitang, for the Parisuddhang, so to become purified even. So, mind is not, it's Pabassara, it's not undefiled, but it's not purified at the level of Bhavanga Chitta. To become purified, the Javana has to, the wholesome Chittas has to arise in the Javana. Then the mind stream becomes purified. So, that is the first way of explaining about the Pabassaramidam Bhikkhave. There is another way of explaining this Pabassaramidam Bhikkhave, like the undefiled nature. So, if we go to the first explanation, this is the Bhavanga consciousness. So, then if you take this as Bhavanga, then what happens at a certain level, the defilements arises. So, then when we take the entire mind stream, the Chitta, because here now earlier it didn't have any defilements, now it has defilements, so the entire mind stream is considered as defiled. So that when we come into the even to the wholesome side, right, we to the wholesome side, then we can call, now this is the Avajjana, if we consider this as the wholesome consciousness. Now here we say the mind was Pabassara, this is the Pabassara, the Pabassara mind. It became defiled at this level, it became purified at this level. So, mind is neither defiled nor purified at this level. It's only Pabassara. Pabassara means undefiled. Undefiled doesn't mean it's purified. Then the second way of explanation is Chitta plus Chetasikas. Chitta is considered like a water. Chetasika are the substances that are put there. So, Chitta itself, water like clear water, Chitta itself is neither Kusala nor Akusala, it's just a neutral kind of element. But the Akusala Chetasikas by themselves are unwholesome. So, when the consciousness is connected, arises together with Akusala Chetasikas, it becomes defiled. When the consciousness arises with Sobhana Chetasika, the good ones, it becomes purified. So, that is the second way of explaining. Mind is pure, undefiled, not pure, undefiled. It becomes defiled when connected with unwholesome mentality. This explanation you can find in Anudipani. The Venerable Lady Sayadaw gives this explanation as the second way of saying the Pabassara Chitta. So there are the two explanations that within the Theravada tradition, how do we explain Pabassaramidam Bhikkhave Chitta?
When you say Tadanga Nibbana, Tadanga Nibbana, is there any relationship to Anusaya Pariyutta Nitikamal removal of these different levels.
Yes, it's also a very important case. Now, when we say about Tadanga, Vikambana, Samuchcheda and so forth, we are talking about a suppression. Suppression always happens with Anusaya. There is no suppression of Vitikkama, there is no suppression of Pariyuttana. Now, Pariyuttana, some listeners may not be familiar with the terminologies, so I think I better explain a little bit about it before we get into the explanation. So, what Mr. Ananda is asking, we have 3 stages of defilements: Anusaya, the latent, Pariyuttana. Pariyuttana is the obsession, the defilement that arises in our mind, and if we are unable to control it, we act on it. That is called latent obsession and transgression. We kill, for example, we get angry with the mosquito and we kill it. At that level, the defilements are very strong. So now these are the 3 stages of defilement. So when Mr. Ananda is asking, when we say Tadanga Nibbana, is it related to any of these? Yes, they are greatly related to these. Now, when we say Tadanga Nibbana, I mentioned we suppress the defilements and the defilements are not arising. Defilements are not arising. So what is the defilement that does not arise when we observe Sila? When we observe Sila, what is the defilement that does not arise is the transgression level. This level is not going to happen. Obsession may happen. We may get certain thoughts of killing mosquitoes, but as if we do respect our Sila, we would not let our mind to come into this stronger level. We may have desires to steal, to conduct sexual misconduct, or to lie, or to do some other evil acts. Thoughts can occur. That is natural in human mind, a putujjana mind. But if we are wise enough, if we are determined enough, we don't let this to happen. Why is that? Because we have observed the Sila. Because of the power of Sila, that determination, our mind is able to handle it. So what happens? This Vitikkama, we don't let it to happen. So when I say Tadanga, we suppress, defilements are not arising. What level of defilements are not arising? Vitikkama level, not the obsession level. But what is the defilement that was suppressed? That is the question. That is a very good another question. Could we suppress the Vitikkama? No, Vitikkama defilements are the defilements that arise in the mind. Obsession also arising in the mind. What we suppress is Anusaya. In whatever Nibbana, either is Samuchcheda, Vikambana or Tadanga, whatever Nibbana we attain, we cut off the latent defilement. We suppress the latent defilements. Suppression is always with Anusaya. With suppression, we prevent the arising of Vitikkama. We prevent the arising of Vitikkama if we observe Sila. If we attain the jhana, what we suppress is still the Anusaya. We suppress the Anusaya. So at that time, what do we prevent from arising? Pariyuttana, the lust doesn't arise in our mind. A strong lust, strong anger doesn't arise in our mind. Nothing to say about Vitikkama. Vitikkama is a higher gross level. If you have a jhana, even this level is prevented. Nothing to say about this level. There's nothing to talk about this level. So in both the cases, whether we observe the Sila, whether we attain the jhana, the suppression is related to the latent level. So how much the suppression happens, how strong the suppression happens, it determines whether the Vitikkama is prevented from arising or the Pariyuttana is prevented from arising. It means the latent defilements doesn't come into that Pariyuttana or Vitikkama level. That's what happens in the end. But when we in the Magga level, we cut off the Anusaya, so there is nothing to talk about these two because the Anusaya is completely removed. The cause is completely removed. So there is no Pariyuttana, there is no Vitikkama. So at the Sila level, we suppress the Anusaya, we prevent happening of this. We cannot prevent happening of this with Sila. It would come up. But we doesn't let it to come into this level. Why? We have observed the Sila. With the jhana, we suppress this and we prevent the arising of Pariyuttana. Nothing to say about Vitikkama. With the Magga, we destroy the Anusaya, so there is nothing to say about these two levels. So that's why the Sila, Samadhi and Panya has been explained in such level. So I'll conclude, suppression always related with Anusaya, The prevention is related with pariuttana and vitikkama according to the type of nirvana we are talking about.
Sadhu. Thank you so much.
Sadhu. Okay.
Yes, so the first one is, does Vikkambana Nibbana cover Upachara Samadhi like in Uttanusati? That is the first one. And the second one is, what factors determine the expiry date of a certain rebirth producing karma?
Okay. So the first one is whether the Upachara Samadhi is considered as a Vikkambana Nibbana. Yes, it is. According to terminologies that the book says, when you attain the Upachara Samadhi, we normally consider as attainment of Vikkambana Nibbana. But because it says the Upachara Samadhi suppresses the defilements, right? But when we go into the explanation of Vikkambana Nibbana, the Upachara Samadhi does the strong suppression. So we can say with the Upachara you attain the Vikkambana Nibbana. It's perfectly okay to say that. But when you go into the explanation of Vikkambana Nibbana, what the book says is it is attained with jhana. It is attained with jhana. So there is a contradiction, like unclear gray area, what is this Upachara level falls into. But when we go into the explanations of the commentaries, it's very clear at the level of Upachara, the defilements have been Vikkambana, Vikkambeti, put down. So it matches with the term Vikkambana Nibbana. But when I quote from the books about the definition of Vikkambana Nibbana, normally it gives the jhanas. As I remember, I'll check back again. Upachara, maybe Upachara can be mentioned. To my memory, it was the jhanas that have been mentioned mostly. Yeah. So I'll check that again and try to give answer next week, a short answer. And the next question, to be true, I didn't understand that meaning of that word, Dr. Ryan. Expedite?
Yes, so the question is,
can you put it in
factors?
Yeah.
What factors determine the, we can say, expiration date of a certain birth producing karma? Expiration. When is it going to expire?
Oh, okay.
Yes, so expiration date or expiry date of a certain rebirth producing karma.
You mean when a karma has produced the rebirth, how it's going to end? Like when we are going to die, is it?
So it looks to me, from my understanding is that so there is a producing karma, and maybe it gains the opportunity.
Okay.
And then so what factors are going to determine, the when it's going to expire?
It means we are going to die. The being is going to die, right? Okay. Yeah, it depends on, it's a good question. It depends on a few reasons. One is the strength of the karma. The strength of the karma. Karma is it how strong is it is. Some karmas are just capable of giving a 40-year life, or some are 50 years life, some are 100 years, some are 200 years of life. So the strength of the karma is the number one factor. Strength of the karma. Then the age in which we are born into. Age means the lifespan of the certain species. It is determined, it is a cycle according to Theravadins. The human lifespan decreases, increases time to time. So when the Buddha was born, it was said to be 100, and now it's said to be like 70s, 80s, 70s, something like that. And also it changes from the region to region where we live. That's also obvious. So therefore, that is called the age, the species. It is the age of the species, the lifespan of the species. Even someone, now it says the Buddha had a very strong, powerful karma which could make him to live for asankhya of years, a number of years, that uncountable number of years. His karma was so strong, so powerful. But the thing was, his lifespan of the human beings during that time was 100 years, so his karma couldn't last, couldn't endure that decaying body. So he passed away. So lifespan is something that determines how long the karma can give results. It's not, first thing is, even the lifespan is 100 years, if the karma is strong enough just to give 50 years, the person would die in 50 years. There's no, according to Theravadins, there's no whatsoever means by which the karma's strength can be increased after it has given a life. It has given a life, it's no way that we can increase the strength of the karma. But then the next thing is the lifespan. So in some cases, both the lifespan and the karma could expire at the same time, which is a very rare case. which is a very rare case. The other explanation how it come into get expired. It's like now the karma is strong enough to give 100 years of lives, the lifespan, the human lifespan, his body. It depends on personal health also, and also the generation contribution of their family tree. How the body was, some are very healthy families, we call sick families based on genes and so forth. So both are there, lifespan is still there, karma is still there. Even we are still fortunate or lucky or blessed means like we are fortunate enough to have a strong karma and a good lifespan. Still, there can be some reasons that would kill us. One is a different akusala karma would get the opportunity and destroy our lives, especially killing others. If we have done killings, sometimes such akusala karmas come forth and destroy our lives, even while the karma which gave the patisandhi is still there, has the strength, and the lifespan is still remaining. The next reason, it can be even without a past karma, just cruelty of someone. Just the cruelty of the society could kill us. Sometimes our misbehaviors, even we have a strong karma to live, we have a lifespan still remaining to live. If we misuse our health, like sometimes take alcohols, take drugs, and do some improper, have some unhealthy behaviors, like not maintaining our lives properly, body properly, having bad habits. This could cause for the arising of certain sickness and cause our untimely death. Now, for example, if someone gets cirrhosis by having abandon of alcohol, this sickness is not because of past karma. This is because of our own misbehavior. Sometimes some people would suicide themselves. Some are very careless in certain acts. And also certain sudden, diverse, adverse weather conditions like the tsunami which caused the destruction in Asia. According to Theravada perspective, we should not determine that all the people who died with the tsunami had a past karma to die. There were people who was taken there by the past karma and who died drowning. For sure there would have been people who died because of their past karma. But some, I would say most of the people, I just guess, seems according to the Buddhism, we can say some people, at least some people, had the good karma to live and also had the lifespan to live. There was no past akusala karma to kill them because of the weather. Weather overcome all these conditions and can destroy. Suddenly an earthquake. When an earthquake kills many people, it doesn't mean all the people who had to die were there. No. There were people who could live more, but because of the weather conditions, they died. So, in the fourth factor, there can be many reasons. While the karma is still strong enough and while the lifespan is still remaining, there can be many other reasons why our life can be stopped. So, that is why the Buddha mentioned be diligent. There is no guarantee. In some cases, if your karma is so strong and no other reason could interrupt your life. There are some beings, like the Buddha, he said, there is no way monks, the Tathagata would die because of some other extra reason. The Tathagata's death is determined to happen in a natural cause because of his abandon of parami. So likewise, some people cannot be killed in that life. There are certain beings who have abandon of merit that determines their death of that life. Determine means it cannot be caused by unnecessary, it cannot be interrupted, the life cannot be interrupted by whatever means. But in the most of the cases, our lives are not determined so. So that's why Buddha mentioned be diligent. You can lose your life, this opportunity at any time. Even you have a good karma, even your lifespan is still remaining, you still are young, even you don't have a past karma to kill you. Still there can be many other reasons, the social reasons, the environmental reasons, your own negligence, ignorance, mistakes could cause this thing to happen. It may seem very unfair, but that is the nature of samsara. So that's why Buddha said you cannot guarantee about this. So be diligent and try to strive and end this suffering. When you get the opportunity, the Buddha's teachings is still prevailing. So therefore, these are the reasons that life can be expired.
Sorry, buddy. I have a very short question.
Okay.
So, because I have a question about the lifespan. As you said, during Buddha's time, the lifespan was like 100 years. And nowadays, it's decreased. But according to archaeology, it says nowadays the lifespan is longer than before.
Yeah, this.
Also, yesterday when I read a book about the Buddhism, they said actually during Buddha's time, lifespan was very short. Even the person comes to like 50 years old, we consider they are very like advanced in age. But nowadays, we say 50 years is very young, right?
Right. So this, I was aware of this change, but I was talking and based on the tradition. If you according to Theravada tradition, the thing is that it is declining. So when we go into the archaeological aspect, yes, the lifespan has increased. It doesn't mean, even scientifically, what they are saying is the rate of disease deaths have decreased, and the quality of food have increased. Quality of food, some would not agree with me on that. Sorry for that. Quality of food means like the condition, I would say. Conditions have increased, and the untimely deaths, the child deaths have decreased. So overall, people live more than the ancient humans, overall. And also there are less disasters and so forth, according to some because the deaths from wars and all have decreased greatly during these last few decades. So overall, the humans tend to live more. So that's why even that this philosopher, the thinker Noah, that the Israeli person who wrote the books, like very best-selling books about the human history, he suggests that it doesn't mean that the quality of the life, quality of the body has increased, so people are living longer. The main reason is that we have prevented the untimely deaths. We have prevented the untimely deaths, as far as I know. That is how we would explain. So overall, the human lifespan, humans tend to live more than ancient days because of the invention of medicine and so forth, and the technology, and also especially the child deaths, which have greatly decreased because of the vaccinations. So other than that, I think there is there, I don't know whether there is any evidences to show that the quality of the body has changed, so the lifespan has increased. As far as I know, maybe I'm wrong, far as I know, according to the facts I have collected, what has happened is the shield, there is a greater shield around the human life. So the diseases, so the plagues and the famines which caused abundance of death, and also the wars which caused abundance of death in past, have greatly decreased. So the humans have the opportunity to live longer. So when we take the average of humans who live longer, today humans live longer than the before. But it doesn't mean, now when it comes to Theravada tradition, they are talking about the quality of the body cells, that whether it is able to endure such a long lifespan or not. So that's what they are saying. I'm not defending the tradition here, but the tradition is saying the quality of the body has decreased. So even in past lives, in the ancient days, people could live 200, 300 years before the time. But archaeologically, we don't have any evidences to prove these things. I know about that. But when you are talking about within the tradition, we normally say the lifespan has decreased. And also there are many places within the tradition that cannot be proven with the scientific and archaeological facts. Even the origin of the world, which has been explained in the Aganya Sutta, if we go into the scientific evidences, which is a great difficult thing to be explained. So yes, you are correct, Sally, in terms of archaeological and scientific facts that have been published so far. Humans today humans live longer than the past human.
Okay, thank you, Penny.
Yeah, call it a day, and thank you for joining, and may this merit help us to attain the greater liberation, and also the Buddha Sasana lasts long. Buddha Sasanang Chirantithatu, Buddha Sasanang Chirantithatu, Buddha Sasanang Chirantithatu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.